Welcome back. Now, football pundit Rio Ferdinand has found love again with former reality TV star Kate Wright, with the couple announcing their engagement last week on Instagram.
Ferdinand has spoken openly about his pain and grief at the death of his late wife in 2015, talking about the struggles of being both mother and father to their 3 children, and has admitted that his new fiancée has been a source of comfort for both him and his children.
Psychologist Alison Keating joins us now with her advice on how to find love again after the loss of a spouse or partner. Good morning, Alison.
Good morning.
You're very welcome.
Hi, Alison.
What a tricky subject. What a difficult subject to talk about. In Rio Ferdinand's case, he, by all accounts, is one of the nicest people you can meet. Clearly was a doting father. They were a great couple. And was clearly heartbroken then when his wife passed away. When you hear some people saying, no, it's too soon. It's too soon. I don't agree with it. What do you say to that? Is it different for every person?
I think we can't pass judgment.
Yeah.
I really, and this is a man who has 3 young children, and as I said, he was so open about his grief, which I just think is fantastic. If more people openly talked about the reality of how utterly heartbreaking it is, not just for him, but for the whole family.
And for men, it was quite unusual to see this heroic character. I think he shed a tear on this morning, didn't he, with Holly and Philip? He was so kind of, in such a healthy way, he was so open about his grief, wasn't he?
And I think, isn't that wonderful? Because the reality is, you're going to be heartbroken.
It's horrendous.
Like she was only 34. She was a young woman. They had a young family. They seemed very much in love. So, imagining what that would be like, and we all have families, it's unimaginable. And you can really empathise with how difficult that actually is. But I think the importance of actually being honest about the unbearable pain, I think that actually is a really good. I think sometimes we're constantly highlighting and, being strong and not actually being honest about how challenging that actually would be.
Of course, we've just seen a picture of Rio with Rebecca, his late wife, there. There we have it. So a very happy couple, a desperately sad situation. Do you think people judge men and women for going into a relationship too soon after the death of a loved one, Alison?
I think they can. And I think it would be really great if we just don't judge if you haven't been in that place.
Yes.
I think we have to have empathy. I think every situation is different. And, we are wired to be in relationships. And when someone dies, not only does that person die, but I do think a part of you dies as well. And it leaves this gaping hole. I'm not sure if you saw Niamh Fitzpatrick's full article this week about her sister Dara, and the image they used was this person with a huge hole, and I just thought that's exactly what it is, and the honesty and the authenticity of what she was actually saying. And one of the core things that really came out for me was that grief has no manners. It has no manners, and none of this is planned. Nobody actually wants it, but especially, say in the case of Rio, with your spouse, you hope you're going to be together forever.
So does this boil down to how the individual deals with the grief
themselves
and the grieving process? In other words, how do they know when they're ready to love again? I mean, I remember seeing it myself when my mother died. I remember seeing my father. The man barely spoke for 6 months after. You'd come home and you'd go into the room and find him sitting just looking at the fireplace with the television off, just broken, utterly heartbroken. Is it how you deal with that, and how do you know then that you're ready to move on, or do you ever know?
I suppose, like say with the case of your dad there, and so many people, they can die of heartbreak.
Absolutely,
you can. If the impact it has.
You often hear the story, don't you, of one partner following the other shortly afterwards.
So then I suppose, wouldn't it be good to give people the message of hope that it is a wonderful thing when you begin to feel ready? And then, I mean, the complications of grief just go on and on. Then people start actually feeling guilty if they have met someone else. And then they're making a comparison between the 2 relationships. Because say this person you've married and you met them when you were younger, you didn't have children. It was an easier love. There weren't as many complications. Whereas when you're going into a second relationship, after,
and there are kids involved as well.
And there are kids involved, and there's a lot of emotional wounds. There's a lot of kind of pain clocked up. And I suppose love is something that's so worthwhile, but people who have grieved, they know that that's the cost that you pay. Is there a pattern, Alison, amongst men and women? Do men find themselves loving quicker
after the loss of a loved one?
I suppose there can be stats backing up that men, you know, might look for another relationship, but I think everyone's different.
Yeah.
You know, and I think at the core of this is it's so important to actually bring it back to you and what actually you're actually feeling. So I think if we just dropped the judgments, we dropped actually passing comment.
Exactly.
Because that's what people feel. They feel shame then that they actually perhaps have met someone else.
Yes.
And I mean, when you think about it, you know, when the other person has passed away, the survivor has so many feelings that are, you know, you feel guilt, that perhaps when the grief starts to abate somewhat, you actually begin to feel bad. My God, my relationship with that person is changing. Or say you start going into a new relationship, then you're making comparison between the two. So they're gone, but they're not forgotten. I don't ever think you can replace somebody else with the person that, you know, you were
But that's what I
married
think
to.
makes Rio's story very important. The fact that after Rebecca died and he did that documentary for the BBC and then the appearance of This Morning, and he spoke about it. And equally, it's important that he's speaking out now, because I remember when I saw the photographs during the week and I heard he's engaged, and I saw the engagement photographs. Did you see them on the top of the tower in Dubai? And I thought, oh, that's cheesy. And then I looked at it and I went, no, but the kids are there. And
Kids are
and there's
very
a
much
second
involved.
photograph then where they're all hugging as a family. Then you're thinking.
Yes. And he included the children in the
of course he
proposal
does,
and all
yeah.
that.
I mean, the physical and psychological impact of grief is immense. It really, really is.
Yeah.
And if, you know, you are able to get through, which is some massive feat, the grief, and then open yourself to the risk. And it is a risk because you know what the pain feels like.
Yes.
You're actually venturing forth. I think we have to commend people.
Yes.
And I think there is still a stigma that people feel that they're doing a disservice to the person who's been left behind, even just, you know, from people making comments. And I think if we step back and go, look at this story and to take, you know, to use it as an example and say, you know what, this is a really good story. There's a new family unit and everybody's been involved. Everybody is kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. He asked the children beforehand.
He included them in it.
He included
in
them.
the whole
You know,
process,
she's saying,
yeah.
I'll never replace the mother, and she won't. And that's right.
Yeah.
It's just different. You're blending a different family together. And I think that idea of just you're making new space for a different relationship rather than replacing.
In terms of tips for anyone in Rio's situation, male or female, it is about not comparing and not feeling guilty about your feelings, I suppose, because it's so individual, as you say.
I think we have to recognise that you can have simultaneous, really horrible feelings at the same time. It can be a bit queasy, and maybe actually acknowledge that you do feel guilty, but then write out, why do I actually feel guilty about this? Put it on paper. I think we kind of, when we think it in our heads, there's just so many, it just darts all over the place. Whereas we put it on paper, we can actually stand back and go, do you know what? These aren't all my feelings. It's because, you know, the neighbour down the road said, oh, really, it's a bit soon. You know, it's other people's judgments. So write down the guilt. Guilt as an emotion is to show us when we're doing something wrong.
Yes. It's often the people, as you say, the neighbour down the road, that are far removed from the situation that will be the quickest to judge.
Exactly. And I think we just have to kind of cultivate, you know, compassion and to hope that if someone actually takes that bold step of gaining a new relationship, that we commend them on their courage to do so, because it is courage.
It is, absolutely, yeah.
Sage advice. Thank you, Alison.
you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Alison. I think I want to go home and have a good cry.
I make you cry, that's not good.
In a good way, in a healthy way. Right, after the break, style that'll take you from desk to dawn this party season. See you in 3 minutes.